else.
Well,
Anyways, and so the guy was saying, no, I'm not going to throw my potato into the oven. And I said, you're going to do it, or else you're going to talk to my friend, the lawyer. Yeah.
What type of potatoes?
The red. No, Yukon Gold.
Yukon Gold?
Yeah. Anyways, hello and welcome to the Average Bros Gym podcast. We're your hosts with eerily similar names, Corey and Croy, walk you through fitness, health, and life fitness, health, and life advice, which seeks to meet you where you're at. No polarizing black and white takes, just genuine advice and good conversation. And you know what? That was the very first time I did that from full on memory. Didn't read a damn thing off that phone because I couldn't pull it up fast enough. Let's go. We're back, everybody, to the house. We got Corey here. We got Paris in the background.
Yes.
We've got Murph, who's licking his... God damn it, Murph, he's licking himself. Murph, he's licking himself down here below our feet. You got your boy in the house, rocking the Tennessee Volunteers hat.
I see that.
I know.
You have quite of an expansive hat collection.
Yes, this one was unintentional.
Unintentional?
Unintentional. So by the time that this episode comes out, I will already have given Tevin his hat. So no, I saw this really cool University of Arizona hat. My good friend Tevin is from Tucson, Arizona. So I got this hat for him. And then when it came, it was this hat plus an American flag hat. And I was like, that's not my order. And so they just messed up the order. But they were really nice. They said, hey, you just keep those hats and we'll just send you the other one. And I was like, cool. I kind of like, it's a nice white hat. Tennessee Volunteers. I got it in Tennessee. But it backfired today, Corey.
Why?
I'll tell you the story.
I can't wait.
I was walking at Snail Lake Regional Park. Actually, I think it was Grass Lake. But anyways, it's in Shoreview-ish, so it's kind of next to Roseville, up in the northeastern suburbs of Minneapolis here in Minnesota. And I was walking along the trail, and there's a gentleman taking photos, and he probably looked to be in his 50s or 60s, wearing sunglasses and a hat, like a sun hat, kind of. And I'm walking past him, and he's kind of, we kind of nod and say hello. And then he says, "Oh, UT." I was like, "Ah, fuck." He looks at my hat and he's like, "Oh yeah, like I went there." I was like, "Are you a?" I was like, "Were you a student?" And I was like, "Corey, something about me. I don't like disappointing strangers." And he didn't just say like, "Oh, UT." He was like, "Oh, UT."
Yeah,
like it's the way in which you say something. I'll tell you another story before I finish this one. When I was younger, and by younger I mean like 6 years ago.
Nice. Still younger.
I was in a facility I was going in for like a massage, and I was wearing a hat, and it was a Pittsburgh Pirates hat. And the woman at the counter, she was like, "Oh, like, are you from Pittsburgh? Like, that's where I'm from." And I was like, "No, I'm not from Pittsburgh." And she just like stopped talking. And she said like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "I just like the hat." She's like, "Yeah, it looks good." And then that was it. And I don't know. Something about that exchange haunts me to this day.
Does it? Yeah.
Yes.
You just felt like what could have the possibilities been, where that conversation could have led had you responded differently.
And that brings me to this story. So when this man is exclaiming that he went to University of Tennessee, and he asked me if I was a student, well, I kept going. I lied to this man.
Wow.
I said, well, not me, my brother, right? Because if I say my brother, that excuses any lack of knowledge I'll have about the University of Tennessee's customs or faculty or campus knowledge, right? So I say, "Oh yeah, my brother went," and then I proceed to then say, "We were from Dayton, Ohio originally, and I went to the University of Minnesota. My brother stayed kind of in that area and went to UT." Now, in any lie, as Murph knows, you have to ground it in fact. So, although we are not from Dayton, Ohio, my mother is from Dayton, Ohio. So I visited there quite a few times growing up, and Dayton, Ohio is just a little bit north of Knoxville, Tennessee, which is where the University of Tennessee is. So if you go north through Kentucky, I think you go through like Lexington, and then you go through, and then Dayton is in Ohio, right? So it's only one state away, essentially. So that part is true. Also, I did go to the University of Minnesota, so that part is true. My brother did not go to University of Tennessee. But I said that because I did not want to disappoint this random stranger. And we talked a little bit, and I asked him how his experience was, because you got to put it back on them so they kind of forget their suspicion of why it took me so long to answer that question. If you are tangled up in our wires, buddy, Jesus Christmas, come on, get out of here. And so that was the thing, and I asked him how it was, and he said it was big, it was loud, and there's lots of football. And I was like, that makes sense. That's an SEC school right there. And then I kind of was like, oh, see you later, but I made a polite goodbye, and then I walked away.
Oh,
and I lied to this man, this innocent man, about me going to about my brother going to the University of Tennessee. He did not go to the University of Tennessee. He did go to Beloit College. He also went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he also went to Colorado State University, and then Rocky Vista Medical School, which he did not go to the University of Tennessee. The one school I did not go to.
That's an interesting experiment or like exercise that you could kind of participate in as to whether or not you want to choose to be honest and forthcoming with your, I don't know, allegiances with which school that you attend. But it's kind of fun to just get into a conversation with a stranger. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, kind of an astonishing memory that you had there to be able to also, on quick recall right there, be able to list the several universities in which this man also attended. It's rather impressive.
My brother. Yeah. Well, this guy, I don't know where he went, but I know that he went to University of Tennessee.
Oh, wait, before
my brother has gone to those other places. Yeah. Which is easier to remember than this random gentleman that I encountered. But thankfully, I've played enough NCAA football, a video game in my youth, that I know the University of Tennessee fight song.
Do you?
I don't know the lyrics, or if there are lyrics, but that is the rouser. And then I know that Rocky Top is a thing. So I think it's something has to do with the University of Tennessee. So there we go. That was my day. That was the story of this hat. And a legend is being born.
I like that.
Go Vols.
Go Vols.
Go Vols. The University of Tennessee is the Volunteers. I think it has to do with like a Civil War unit.
Oh, okay.
Volunteers.
Because when I think of Tennessee, I think of women's basketball. Right?
Yeah, is that right? The Lady Vols, yeah.
Yes, the Lady Vols.
Yeah, Pat Summitt, who was R.I.P. Pat Summitt. She was a very, very good. I mean, very good. She was like one of the best college coaches in the world at any point in life.
Yeah, I think if you're making a pantheon of all-time greatest coaches, like the name is going to definitely be brought up.
Like Mike Krzyzewski, like Gino Auriemma, like Pat Summitt.
Who's the one that is that LSU currently? Obviously.
LSU is Kate Mull. No,
you're on the right track there. I don't know.
Is that Kate Mulvaney? Yeah. My former roommate Ryan would know because he hates her, so he would know.
Oh, why is that? Because wasn't he?
He was an Iowa guy.
Okay, I was just going to say, wasn't he a big Caitlin Clark? They just got bounced in the WNBA playoffs.
Yeah, it's true. Our Minnesota Lynx. Let's do sports update.
Yo.
Wait. Wait, hold on.
Is it the clap, the applause?
Sports update. Yeah,
that was way better.
We got an air horn. Sports update. Minnesota Lynx they've won the first round of the WNBA playoffs. They defeated Diana Taurasi and the Phoenix Mercury. Taurasi, of course, a former Auriemma disciple from UConn, and she had a storied WNBA career, but the Lynx just ended it. They advanced to face the Connecticut Sun, which is odd because there is no sun in Connecticut, as far as I know. And they're facing them Sunday, I believe, is game 1. So there you
go. Ooh, okay. How long is the series? Is that
So the first round is 3 games, which is kind of shitty. It's like, basically, if you have a bad 2 games, you're out, you're bounced, right?
I actually don't mind that though.
And it's quick. Yeah, it's efficient. Second round is either 3 or 5, best of 3 or 5. I don't think they go to 7.
Okay.
I think even the finals is just 5, but I could be wrong. Fact check me on that one, but I think it's just either 3 or 5 for the second round. So
okay,
yeah. So, but this is semifinals. So if they win this, they're in the finals against probably Las Vegas Aces. I think they're back-to-back champs. The Aces have Asia Keeling, or
Asia Wilson.
Asia Wilson, yeah.
She was just MVP, right?
Asia Keeling is someone too. Yeah, she was last year, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know if they announced it this year already, but yeah, no, she's probably one of the best players in the league. But like of all time.
Yeah, well, there was some record that she just set for most points, I think, scored in an individual season.
See that? Yeah.
Could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah. So there you go. I know. Sports update. Yeah.
It was funny because when you were talking about, we were trying to figure out the LSU women's coach, the Mulvaney.
I'm gonna look it up because now I feel bad.
But that my brain just immediately associated with another M name, that R.I.P. Professor McGonagall.
Oh,
did you see that today?
I did see that, unfortunately.
I should also, we should, as you're researching right now, get the actress's name.
Maggie Smith, I believe.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah. One of the most badass characters in Harry Potter, in my opinion.
McGonagall was great. Kim Mulkey, not Mulvaney.
There it is.
Yeah, no. McGonagall in the books is such like a great mother figure, kind of, but also kind of like this figure, I think, in Harry's life that he needs. You know what I mean? Because Maggie Smith, yeah. Because I don't know, he doesn't really have that, like, he's an orphan and his fucking adoptive family is terrible and all those fun things, but like she provides that kind of like caring mother figure, but also like very, very stern. And it's also interesting because you never really get like too much description of McGonagall, as far as like chewing his paws up today. Sorry. You never get too much of a description of like kind of what her background is, which I think would be fascinating to like learn about all those professors and like how they came to be experts in their field. But yeah, no, Maggie Smith, R.I.P. She's got a lot of other roles too. Downton Abbey she was in, but
that's the other one that's been showing around on any social media going around.
And I'm sure like the British listeners in our audience, all three of them, I'm sure the British listeners in our audience probably remember her for other roles. I'm sure she was, quite a bit more famous back in the day as well. We're just talking about her like roles since 2000, which is basically those two like big ones for American audiences at least. So yeah, man, R.I.P.
Well, wasn't Harry Potter, it was generally all English actors?
It was all English actors.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually pretty sick.
Yeah. I mean, except for maybe like when they actually had people who weren't English on the show, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, when they had like, in the fourth book, when they've got like the Durmstrang, Eastern European, and they've got the Beauxbatons, the French people come in. Those actors probably were actually, French and
and rightfully so.
Like Hungarian or something. But yeah. So
just saw that going around. I was like, oh man, we got another one that bites the dust. Which, I mean, I guess is inevitable. You had Dumbledore, the OG Dumbledore, that's gone. Hagrid,
Richard Harris,
years back. Yep.
Michael Gambon died, didn't he, as well? He took over for Richard Harris.
Yes, that's right. I think he also did.
Gambon.
Pretty recently too.
I think so. I was in the last couple of years.
Yep. I also remember him just from his role in Pirates of the Caribbean, I think.
Oh yeah.
Didn't he play one of the guys with the tentacle?
He was also he was also in Sleepy Hollow.
I don't know if I saw that.
Sleepy Hollow. Oh, maybe you should watch it this holiday season.
Halloween's coming up.
Like Halloween, yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's a good movie. I mean, there's actually quite a bit of Harry Potter actors in that one, because Hollow came out in 1999, I believe, and then Sorcerer's Stone was 2001.
Okay.
So it was very recently afterwards. So
is it more of a? I mean, Sleepy Hollow. It doesn't sound like it's going to be more of a scary movie. Like,
are you familiar with the Headless Horseman story?
I mean, Headless Horseman. Wasn't he also a Harry Potter? There was like a Headless Horseman, maybe.
Yeah,
there was a headless guy, nearly headless Nick. That's a completely different guy.
So the Headless Horseman was originally a kind of like short story written by Washington Irving back in, I believe, 1800s, a long time ago, several hundred years ago. And it was about basically this town in northern New York, right, like New York State, where there was this former German mercenary, because in the not Civil War, the War of Independence with Britain, I believe there were German, like I believe Britain had like German mercenaries, like Hessian soldiers. I could be wrong. Anyways, so that was like the story of Sleepy Hollow was like this Ichabod Crane, who was a school teacher who was kind of like a nervous dude and kind of annoying in a lot of ways, was in this town, and the local legend was of this headless horseman that would like ride around at night searching for his lost head. And that was the creepy story. And it was like he was this former German mercenary that was beheaded in the war. And so that was Sleepy Hollow. And then, they go around the whole story, and Something happens to Ichabod. He either like dies or doesn't die. It depends on the version of the story that you hear. But so Sleepy Hollow was directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. And you got a lot of it was 99, so she was really young. And then he was also really young. So but it's an interesting movie. It's good. Okay. I like it. It's good. It's not like scary, but it's like creepy. Halloween for sure. Oh, Anthony Hopkins. No, it's not Anthony Hopkins. Christian Walken.
That one you're gonna have to refresh my memory.
More cowbell. We need more cowbell.
Oh, Christopher Walken. Yeah.
Christian Walken. Did I say Christian?
Yeah. Christian Walken.
Watson is the Green Bay Packers wide receiver.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Of that.
Yep.
Christopher Walken. Yes.
Oh, that's kind of a stellar little cast. Tim Burton, Johnny Depp, Christopher Walken, and then who was the actress?
Christina Ricci. She was Wednesday Addams originally in like the early 90s. Addams Family.
Okay.
Addams Family.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then who's the new Wednesday Addams?
That's Jenna Ortega.
And she is also in the new Beetlejuice.
Correct.
Yeah, which I heard was actually pretty good too. Also a Tim Burton.
Correct.
Film.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the first one. Meg likes it though. She used to watch it a lot growing up.
I just watched it for the first time just several weeks back.
Did we have the exact same conversation in the last episode?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right. Fantastic. Warrior Horn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're getting to that point in time where you're rewatching like the scary classic movies. Like I guarantee over the course of October, I'm going to be watching Hocus Pocus.
Oh yeah.
Some point or time or another.
Now, the sequel did come out last year. Did you watch that?
Which sequel? Wait, the Hocus Pocus. There's a sequel?
There is.
Oh, no. No, I have not.
I haven't either.
Oh.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it either.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. Anytime there's like a sequel, I'm very, I don't know.
Well, a sequel that's driven by like a cult fandom of the original movie 20 years prior. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
you kind of know where that's going. You're like,
yeah. No, it could be probably done well, but sometimes it's all like fan servicey. So it's like, it's just kind of things just done to be like, to pay homage to the prior, iteration of it. So it's like, yeah.
Did they bring back the original cast?
I believe they did actually.
They did?
I think for the sisters they did.
Okay.
So Bette Midler and the rest.
Sarah Jessica Parker and I can't never remember the third one.
I can't either. I feel bad about that.
Yeah,
but it is what it is. Yeah.
Whoa, we just had a little voice match there, dude. I saw on the way in. Do you ever remember getting the Schwanzman?
Is this like a horror story? Is this
no.
Schwanzman?
No, well, I mean, I guess you could maybe turn it in. No, the Schwanzman. I saw on the way in that it was like the cold delivery truck that would drive around.
Oh, yeah.
Just went out of service after like 70 some years.
That's crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
We always used to, I mean, as soon as the truck would drive up, you would hear it coming along, and that would be like my brothers and I was like, oh, cool. This is where you get all the like the pizzas and the ice creams. But I just went out of business. This is like a not Netflix. What's the other one? The movie place that you would go to as a Blockbuster.
Yeah, Hollywood Video, depending on what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like just like one of those classic things that you had as a kid that now is like out of service. You're like, oh.
Man, movie rentals. Damn.
Yeah.
Movie rentals.
That was always fun.
Yeah. Oh man, it was so fun because it was like Friday night, we're gonna go rent. What are we gonna rent for the weekend? Yep. Right? It was an event. They always had like candy there. They had because it was kind of like they had like popcorn and stuff like that. Like, and then I don't know, you get like we get like video games sometimes too.
Yes,
but like I don't know if they're ever really any good, but man, they had those for times. What was like your go-to? Did you have like a go-to genre movie that your family rented?
Go-to genre? Not necessarily. I mean, it was more or less I was always the one that was in charge of picking out movies. My mom would just send me and my brother like, oh yeah, just run down to Family Video was our video store, and then that was or I guess Blockbuster was like way back. That was when we were like kids, and that's where we would more often or not just like get the games.
They had like the kind of like the mom and pop video rentals too. They didn't always. It wasn't always just Blockbuster or Hollywood. They had homegrown stores of that too, I guess.
Yep. And my brother and I, that was always our little mission. It was generally we would run down, pick out the movie, and then on the way back, that was always usually our pizza night as well. So it was like pizza and a movie, and you get some, candy or popcorn that would go along with it. But yeah, that was usually just made for my brother and I to decide what the movie was going to be. And we never necessarily had a genre. It would just be kind of like whatever we thought would look good.
Sandlot over and over and over again. Every time they got the Sandlot.
Forever.
Well, that segues us into the other part of the thing I wanted to talk about as well. And this happened several weeks ago, but Corey and I have had a tough schedule kind of getting in together. But it has to do with movies, and I hope you don't mind if I hop right in.
Oh, go for it.
Okay. Well, so I watched Meg and I watched the movie The Whale recently, maybe in the last month or so. It came out a little bit ago. I believe Brendan Fraser, I think, won the Oscar for it.
I don't know about an Oscar. It might have been some
An award for it.
Yeah, some award.
Won an award. I know it was. I know it was nominated like Best Supporting Actress for. Let's take a look here. Hong Chow, who plays like. Okay, basically, if you haven't seen this movie before, Brendan Fraser plays a character who is morbidly obese, like to the point of dying essentially from obesity. And the entire thing, I think, was adapted from a play, and it makes sense because the entire thing takes place in one apartment, right? Similar to kind of like, have you ever seen the movie Locke? Locke with Tom Hardy.
I know the movie that you're talking about. No, I have not seen it. It's definitely on my watch list.
Actually, a really good movie, but the entire thing takes place inside of a car.
I've heard.
And he is talking to himself. He is talking to like his past, his father, but he's not really there. And then he's talking to like people on the phone, and that's the entire movie. And it sounds probably, if you're listening, sounds really boring, but it's really good. Anyway, so the entire movie takes place inside of an apartment. Sadie Sink is in it. If you remember her, she's from Stranger Things. Probably one of her roles that you probably remember her from. I mean, the only really remember her from just in American audiences. But Sadie Sink, she's in Stranger Things. She plays Brendan Fraser's daughter. The entire movie is basically like this guy is morbidly obese. He knows he's morbidly obese. He's going to die. He knows he's going to die. He could go to the hospital, of course, but like he's saved up all this money, and this money is for his daughter, who he abandoned essentially 8 years prior. And it turns out, like, you know, he was with his then wife. They had the daughter, and then he was closeted homosexual the entire time, or for the most part. Fell in love with someone, left the family for them. You know, all these other things happen. Like, I don't want to go into spoilers, but basically, like, you know, the lover like dies of suicide. It throws Brendan Fraser's character in like this really terrible loop where essentially he uses food to like compensate for his despair. And to detrimental effects, to like disastrous effects, where he's like, you know, again, very, 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 very overweight, very, very obese, and like can't do too much and is eating himself to death essentially. And the movie is very, very interesting. And the reason why I bring it up is because we watched it, and like there were times where, don't get me wrong, the movie itself it's good, but there are times where I was bored. I was like, you know what I mean? The entire thing takes place inside an apartment. But I was looking online afterwards, and I saw that it got a lot of like kind of criticism, and the criticism was mostly levied at the fact that a lot of people were saying that it kind of makes fun of or disrespects or like trivializes like people who are overweight or obese, and kind of like the portrayal of it, which is very interesting to me. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Do you have any first thoughts just listening to what I'm saying?
Well, it's just the being morbidly obese. That's not something that you generally see like within cinema. The only other movie that I can think of that would have depicted something similar would have been like a movie like Shallow Hal. Like other, you know what I mean? But that's like the only to
we're
that
getting
extent.
to Shallow Hal,
To that extent, you know, I don't know of any other ones where it was, you know, shown in that manner. Now, obviously, this sounds like it's in a completely different context,
very different tone.
Yeah. But other than that,
definitely not a comedy.
Or I guess I don't know. The other one would be like, what was like the Eddie Murphy one? The other was like, you know, but and that's more of like the comedy kind of thing, whatever that one was. Like,
we're gonna get into that.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Know? But this sounds, it took a little bit of a heavier tone.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's the basic premise of the movie, and you know, I won't go into the full details, I guess, but it's very and so a lot of the criticism and was levied, and I'll kind of pull up some of it here because I think it's interesting, and I want to have a conversation about it because I thought this was pretty interesting.
Oh yeah.
So I'm reading. This is going to be a reading from the Wikipedia a little bit. So I'll say that much. So the film has received criticism for its portrayal of the main character. Time magazine said some of the film's critics believe it perpetuates tired tropes of fat people as suffering, chronically depressed, and binge eating. Which, like, yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's because the thing. So it's like Corey and I, obviously, like, I think we're pretty quote unquote healthy weight, right? There's a difference between we can I think safely say that there is a very unrealistic societal standard for a lot of people of like and a standard of beauty, right? For both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, there are times where that societal standard leaves people who are on the outside of that feeling shamed, feeling like they don't belong. There's essentially an accepted level of attractiveness. A lot of it is very Eurocentric. A lot of it has to do with like weight, right? So we can say that very, very clearly. I think that like that is an issue. It exists in magazines and media and social media and movies and TV. That all exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think also too with this movie, this character was, I thought, very humanized. It shows that he has this really deep sadness, this pit, right? And it's like you can treat kind of like this addiction to eating as coping with feelings. You can treat it kind of like an addiction of like drugs or alcohol, where yes, part of it is a choice. There is a level of personal accountability and responsibility on someone, like, and let's say being like overweight when compared to like a doctor's rate of BMI, which is usually pretty bullshit.
Yep.
But like that's different than being like morbidly like 600-pound life. Like this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is a very different thing. And so it's like you can't. I don't think we can say, okay, I'm like my doctor says I'm a couple like 10 pounds overweight and I need to lose some weight to like, improve my like heart health,
mm-hmm.
or like to go off my medication. That's different than like this person's literally eating themselves to death.
Yeah.
Right. So let's make that really clear. But like, obesity and what causes that, there's multifaceted approach. There is a level of personal accountability, but there's also at some point, like if you're using it to cope with something, there is that like kind of like a neurological thing where it's like telling you to do something. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in the movie, it's like he's saving all this money for his daughter, who he hasn't seen in 7 years, 8 years, whatever it is. He tries to reconnect with her. This is Sadie Sink, the daughter. She is rightfully pretty fucking pissed and kind of treats him like shit. And it is what it is. You can't tell a kid was walked out on to accept her parent,
mm-hmm.
right? Years later.
Who also, it sounds like at this point, when he left the family, was in a completely different stage of life.
Yeah.
In terms of his overall health and then mental wellness as well as that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, so that happens. But it's like the characters, I mean, is very humanized. I think like he's very like calm for the most part. He does kind of like, there's reasons why he's doing stuff. Like he ends up like, he's an English professor essentially. And he's like writing his daughter's homework kind of for her, like doing it for her, because she's basically like, I will hang out with you if you do this for me. Where he offers to, if she'll hang out with him. And then the dude knows he's dying. He's like, I wanted to spend time with my daughter for like the last weeks that I have left, right? So I'm like, I feel like that's a very humanizing portrait. Like I didn't think that was like, oh man, look at this obese man. And I think like any suffering he was doing was because of his own choices, not because he was obese, right? And then you also talk about physically obese, moving around, not being able to do certain things. But that's, again, very different than like being overweight. So that was interesting criticism for that. And they got kind of flack for not casting like a fat actor. And I'm like, I get representation matters as well, right? It's like, I think there was a movie not recently, in the last like 20 years, that was about like essentially like Moses, like that story from the Bible.
Okay. Yep.
And they cast like Christian Bale. And it's like, I don't know. Hollywood is a fucked up place in a lot of ways. And it's like, but like a lot of movies big money movies won't get made with like no name actors. And
Yeah.
unfortunately that's how it is, because like and it's getting better now with like representation, right? There's a lot more like Asian American representation as well, like recently. Especially like even the Marvel movies, right? They've been doing a better job of that. So like there's representation is growing in a lot of ways. But it's like, I don't know, this, and Brendan Fraser did a great job with the role. Like he was pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, but then you also got to think about too. You're talking about like representation. How many morbidly obese actors?
Right.
I mean, all right. So like, what do you want for the pool to go?
And they could say like, okay, we're going to add like a fat suit on someone who's already kind of like at a certain level of being overweight. But then it's like, well, like, is it like, I don't know, you draw your line of like, what's pandering? Like, what are we, what audience are we pandering to? And like, what are we saying about this actor? Like, I don't know. And so, not to say that like, criticism is valid. Like people come from different, walks of life than we do. Some of the criticism is from, there was an article written in like 2010 by Chelsea A. Hoyer from, I think it was the obesityaction.org. It was called like Fattertainment, Obesity in the Media, which like, I think in the history,
interesting read.
Absolutely. And in the history of Hollywood and history of TV and movies, like you said, Shallow Hal, like obesity or being overweight has been played for a lot of laughs. Like think of Chris Farley's entire career.
Yeah.
And people loved him. He was great. But like part of his shtick was the fact that he was overweight.
Yep.
And then you have a lot of characters in media that are like overweight that are portrayed in a certain way, kind of like slobbish, right?
Yep.
Dirty or things like that too. So like those tropes and those stereotypes do exist, and those are negative for sure. I just like, it was interesting to see this movie and see a person who was like morbid, like eating themselves to death. But then for people to come out and say, well, that's a representation of all people who are overweight. And I was like, that's not what this is at all. It's very, very different. I felt it's like there's a very clear distinction, right? But anyways, I don't know. I just want to talk about that a little bit because I was so intrigued by that like reading about all this discourse. I was like, what is the biggest issue? Like, what's the issue that's going on here? And I think a lot of it is valid. Again, like fat quote unquote fattertainment, which is what the article used to talk about, being fat essentially in the media and how that's portrayed as kind of like comical or like slob. But it was, and that's valid argument. But it was just, I don't know.
Well, yeah, but there's got to be like a measure of truth to that. I mean, there's a reason that like certain stereotypes would exist, or that you're going to associate that with that individual. So like in this instance, if you're morbidly obese, you were talking about being maybe a little bit more of a slob. I mean, like you're eating a bunch all the time, to be able to even like get to that point. I think the fat entertainment, sometimes I worry about, like you watch like a show like My 600 Pound Life. Like I've never actually seen it, but I wonder, you're for the entertainment purposes, is that something that
should we be watching those shows?
Yeah, like why is that even being portrayed? Like people are watching that, and like I don't know, what does that also say about the people that are watching that as well? To me, like I'm like, what are you gaining out of this? Like I don't want to watch somebody who's sick, and then being potentially even like glorified, or I glorified maybe is like a little bit of a strong word, but I just feel like we could allocate so much of our time and like resources to something other than that of like watching My 600 Pound Life. I feel like that's weird. Did you ever see those? I want to say it's like a brother and sister, who do, I don't know if it's like maybe like eating challenges or something like that, but it was a video. They're sitting down side by side and they just got like an obnoxious amount of food, like way more than what two people should be eating. And then all of a sudden there's like a time lapse that goes from when they first initially started this, and then fast forward 5 years, and it is insane the amount of weight that they put on to getting to the point where this Brendan Fraser character was in The Whale. Like it was that they went from looking essentially like you and me, just a normal average, there's a guy and a girl, and then fast forward to 5-10 years later, whatever it is, and they're doing like the same challenges. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck?
Well, I think like we swing so wildly both directions. I think like truths and can be, and this is why we operate in like the realm we do, truths can be like multifaceted. You can say that there's a very unrealistic standard of beauty portrayed in the media to everybody, and that is absolutely true. You can say that there's a ton of pressure on men and women both, but mostly women, to look a certain way in order to achieve success, That is very, very true. You can say that people who are overweight are stigmatized and they are marginalized in communities. And I think that is also true.
Mm-hmm.
You can also say that there are brands of entertainment that are promoting and like portraying that in like a positive light in like an extreme way.
Mm-hmm.
Like these food challenges. I think they're called like mukbangs, which are like a funny term. I don't know where it comes from. But like there's people that do these things online, you're right, and like they gain more weight and more weight and more weight to the point that they are suffering physiological harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like here's the thing. There are plenty of elite athletes. I'm talking elite athletes who are a higher body fat percentage than like the doctor would recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And they are elite athletes at their level. And so you can't say, oh, this person is harming themselves. But then there's a lot of people who, do these food challenges or in these 600-pound lives. They like physiologically, they are harming themselves by being this heavy and by engaging in the activities they do and the behaviors they do. Right. So it's like you can have both truths can exist where it's like, yes, we do put too much emphasis on how your body looks. And especially for women, we took too much emphasis on that to the point it's very harmful for people's mental health and their physical health, right? Anorexia, bulimia, like those are all conditions that exist in part because of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also say the reverse, the opposite is also very, very damaging. And it's like, when you make shows like 600-Pound Life, are you bringing awareness to the topic, or are you like exploiting it?
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe where people were thinking in their criticism of the movie, that it was like exploitation and of like an overly obese person, or like, again, like, Brendan Fraser obviously in the movie has a ton of moments where he's physically unable to do certain things. You're talking about walking, moving, lifting, like cleaning himself.
Basic daily life tasks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it was like pretty unflinching. And I'm not going to say the movie was like, again, like one of my top movies, because I think there were some parts of it that were pretty contrived and like, I don't know. Aronofsky's not he's a good director, but like there are parts of it I was like, holy shit, this is boring. But like what I didn't think of at all was like, oh, this is somehow exploiting or somehow making light of those who are overweight. And I think like as a health and wellness podcast, like you and I both have had like experiences kind of in the same realm of like either ourselves being overweight or working with people who are overweight, or again, like eating disorders, like things like that. We've kind of been around this sphere for a while. So it's like, this is a topic that is very, very important to both of us, and like understanding kind of like where people are coming from.
Yeah.
In this.
Well, I think it's also interesting, like how you approach that, like with an individual and the way in which that you portray that, or how it is portrayed in social media, like what is socially accepted. You feel like body positivity, like you hear that thrown around a lot. And like, I get that. Like if you want to feel confident in your body, like everybody should, everyone like should strive for that. But then on the flip side of that coin, we should also be able to have a very candid and open conversation about like, okay, regardless of how positive you feel about your body, we can also say that it is maybe potentially in a very unhealthy place. Like if you are obese, or let alone morbidly obese, then you are drastically increasing your potential and possibilities for various metabolic diseases, your risk of cancer. I mean, your daily overall like lifestyle. It's like, yeah, you can barely like get up and move around. I mean, like what quality of life are we talking about there? And then if it is portrayed on something like My 600-Pound Life or in cinema, like, again, I don't know if that's necessarily something we should be striving for as a society or as a culture. Like, that's not great.
There are levels of body fat percentage and just obesity that, increase rate of all cause mortality.
Yeah.
So it's like you can be positive in the sense, and I think like there are two different things. If we look at like, okay, social acceptance, that's not necessarily biological, right? So it's like if we're looking at someone who I believe that there should be a greater level of social acceptance of a wider variety of body types, right? So we're not looking at someone who's like 5 pounds, quote unquote, overweight and saying, oh my gosh, they're fat, or like, oh my gosh, they're not this, or, like we shouldn't have to have dudes look in the mirror and not see abs and feel like shit about it.
Yep.
And for women to like have, like whatever, like deal with their issues and to not feel shit about the way they feel. Like that spectrum should be much bigger than it is. That's separate than getting to a certain level where it's like, this can have physiological harm on you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can have physiological harm inflicted on yourself by being too slender as well, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like there are both extremes that are bad. There's a range that biologically is better to handle stressors in life and better to reduce risk of diseases and things like that too. And that's different than like the socially accepted range of body types.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like both things we have to think of it in both ways. It can't just be one or the other, because like there are facts involved that aren't just the way we feel about things.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that go into that, like the emotional impact that somebody is going through, like when you're struggling with like an eating disorder, such as that. Mental health is going to be a huge role, and they need to seek out professionals to be able to assist them in that endeavor. But it should never be anything necessarily that you're accepting of per se. I mean, you know what I mean? Like if I had somebody in my life that was like morbidly obese, I'm like, I love you, I care for you, but I want you to genuinely get better, and you are like not in a good place right now. And then providing different outlets for them to be able to pursue. And again, that's going to have them take the onus on themselves to be able to like seek that betterment. But in this instance, if it's like in the whale and they're just like closeted, locking themselves in the apartment, it's like, all right, well, I guess that's your decision. But, that's a really hard thing to accept. And I can imagine, as a loved one, a, partner, a son, a daughter, whomever that it might be, like that's something that, thank God, I've never had to deal with. I don't even know what I would do if that was the case. I mean, I got some family members who I've had conversations with, or they've even like approached me regarding various ways in which that they can improve their health and wellness. It's not necessarily the most comfortable conversations per se, like, hey, we got to change like a lot of different lifestyle and behavioral factors that you are, currently participating in. But thankfully just not to that level.
Okay, well, it was also because of the guilt that he felt about leaving his family, and those feelings are multifaceted. But I think like, just like someone has issues with, drugs and alcohol or other types of addictions, I mean, that comes from something like something else, right? It's not just like, you or I we're probably not continue, like we have to like work on, or we're probably not just like going and gorging ourselves with food, right? Depending on what we're dealing with. So it's like there's something else mentally that's going on back there that you have to work on first before you can fix everything else.
Yeah. I remember my only personal experience with working or even knowing someone of that magnitude, for lack of a better word, was, oh my gosh, this would have been maybe about like 10 years ago. I was working at a Snap Fitness at the time. And it was actually a kid that I went to school with. I can't remember if he was in the exact grade as me, but I remember we were on the football team, and he was always a bigger boy. I mean, he's probably about 6'2", maybe. And even when we were playing high school football, he was a large individual. I mean, at that point, he was already probably a little over like 300 pounds. And after high school, and even thinking back on it now, even in high school, I mean, obviously, as you can imagine, he was picked on, and, for being that overweight. When you're in high school, I mean, that is such an anomaly. I don't know about now with where obesity rates are in America. I mean, it's probably not as rare as what you'd imagine now, but even back then, like 10 years ago, you're like, oh my goodness, dude. And all of a sudden he comes back into my life, several years later, working at the Snap Fitness, walking through the door, and I kind of put two and two together. I was like, oh my God, like I remember you. And we, sat down and had a, conversation, and a lot of those different kind of stereotypes, like, the slobbiness kind of still ring true. He just didn't even look like every now and again you would kind of smell a little bit. I was like, I don't even know if he'd like taken a shower in a couple of days. You could kind of tell that like the hair was a little bit greasy, wearing kind of the same kind of, shirts and everything. I was like, all right, like where do we even start here? And I remember telling him like, okay, we're going to have to do some work outside of this. Like I recommend like, seek out a mental health practitioner, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, like whatever you might got going on. Cause he was wanting like, I want to kind of get back into the gym. I'm like, dude, we got to start with just like food and maybe just like walking. Like that'd be great. Let's just get on like on a step program. But it was at that point in my career, I felt so overwhelmed. Like I want to help you, but I feel like at this point, like, I love the fact that you're in the gym, and all I told him was like, I'd love to work with you, but honestly, like when we're here, I'm pretty much just going to want you to be on the treadmill. And it was to the point where I'm like, I don't even know if I'd have to like check the treadmill, like what's the weight bearing, like to that extent. And I don't know like where he's at right now. in his life, but that was the only time that I've had some experience like working with an individual like that. And at that point, I didn't even know what to do. I like seek out a counselor or a therapist. Like that's going to be a great place to start. And like, let's just get you on a step program, and hopefully we can start making some actual steps towards dropping down or cutting down some weight. And as to where he eventually like took that with, I know he worked like on a food truck, and I mean, other than that, his overall caloric intake would have just been absolutely absurd. I think at that point he was pushing close to almost 500 pounds.
Wow.
If I remember right. Yeah. I mean, that's all that really needs to be said. So literally an individual, I mean, he was able to like get up and obviously walk around. He was able to get to the gym. And I was always so stoked every time I would see him walk in. It's like, John, let's just like get you into the gym. I don't care how long you're here. Let's just get you for even if it's 5 minutes, dude, like just take a lap around the gym. But I remember him talking about like the feeling of, I don't like being watched. I feel like I take up so much space, and I don't want to be like judged. And it's like, how could you handle that like psychologically, like being in that body?
Yeah, and that compounds on itself too, because I think you mentioned the stereotype thing where it's like, is that a marker of, and that's not a marker of his weight as much as it could be a marker of like him just, when you get to that point, you're not taking care of yourself anymore. But then when you get to the heaviest weights,
it's fucking hard to do by
yourself. Then it starts happening too, where it's like, it's kind of both things are going back and forth, right? Where it's like, if you value yourself less, you're not going to be taking care of yourself as much. And then that in turn is going to cause you to value yourself even less, because then you have other things. Like you mentioned, like I'm tired of being looked, like those things can like either continue that spiral, or because now you're even more in your own head, or it can like motivate you for other things too, right? It's like, so, and just the fact that he was motivated to get in and move, like, I remember reading a story back in the day about on like the bodybuilding.com forums. Yeah. We all browsed those back in the day. And I think that an article about this guy that like literally he would just walk from his apartment or wherever to the gym, and that was his workout. Yeah. He would walk to the gym, walk back. And then eventually, he'd walk to the gym, do like a whatever, and then walk back. And then like he just did that enough times, where eventually he was walking and then working out and coming back. And it's like that's what you need, especially in those levels. Like if you are trying to make that change, outside of like surgical. Yeah. Right. Yeah. At that point, you might need medical intervention, depending on where you're at.
Which can be a great tool. Like right. There's like a certain drug or something like that.
There's the Ozempic.
Ozempic
that people are using.
It's like if you're that overweight, like I'm all for it. If that's going to help you. I know some people get like their stomachs,
bariatric surgery.
Yeah. And then like at that point, like if you're in that severe of a case, like I'm doing whatever you can, to cut that back down.
100%. And that's something that's like really, really, I'd say those are something that needs to be done outside of just the general movement, but that needs to be part of that program as well when it's safe to do so. When you're able to do so in that movement. So
no, it shouldn't just be like the only thing that you rely on. Like we should still go back to like all those other like different lifestyle factors and behaviors and prioritize those just as much as like, okay, yeah, sure, you can hop on Ozempic or you can, go get that gastric bypass surgery or whatever, but like don't just rely on that if we're not changing any of the other underlying issues that are then going to result in you in getting right back to the same place that you were at before.
Yeah, if you never work on those things, then it's never gonna you're gonna have those issues. Yeah, like I don't know, you can I'm reminded of stories of people that had they've been dealing with certain demons or issues mentally, and they move like locations. Like I'm gonna move to Arizona, and it's like anywhere you go, you're bringing yourself with you. And so it's like it doesn't matter the change of scenery, you're gonna have yourself still. And it's kind of a similar thing here. It's like, you can have a medical intervention like bariatric surgery or Ozempic or whatever, but you're bringing yourself with you. And until you work on those issues, it's going to have the same result. Same thing for any addiction, whether that's an exercise addiction, whether that's like a exercising yourself in the ground, because you can do that too. That's under eating, chronically exercise, that is an addiction. Yeah. Alcohol, drug use, food, whatever that addiction is. Until you work on those issues, either with intervention or solo or, as part of a group or whatever you're doing, that's going to be with you there. So you have to work on those too. It's holistic. That's why, health is so holistic. It's not just how many push-ups can I crank out?
Mm-hmm.
Like your health is measured in so many other ways, and that's for everybody to decide. And that goes back to how we perceive individuals, like, body types and body images. Everybody has their own definition of health and wellness. And, I'm a higher body fat than some people. And, others might say, well, this person, like, a bodybuilder might look at me and be like, well, it's not really that, he's only what, 14% body fat? I don't know about that. Like, someone might look at me and say that. And other people might be like, oh man, that's what I want to look like, right? Or like, that's what I want to feel like. And I can say that I'm healthy while still, like, eating chicken wings sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not all the time. Right? But it's like, we're all left to define it for ourselves. And I think that we need more acceptance in that spectrum of what health looks like. So,
well, and then I think what's an interesting part about the obesity side of things is like your little vice or, addiction that you have, like, it's not obviously as easily hid,
sure.
as opposed to, like, for instance, I've talked about this one previously on the podcast too, but like when I was going through my bulimia bit, it's like I could hide that, like nobody else knew, but if all of a sudden, like, you're that obese, it's like it's very readily apparent to everybody that just sees you that you are struggling, with obviously like food addiction and then whatever other, various mental or emotional things are underlying that issue as well. But I think that's got to be a unique aspect to that where I'm like, okay, everybody else knows that I'm struggling with this and I still can't do, or I feel, incapable of making those changes, like, for myself, and I'm in need of help. Whether or not you're actually, like, actively searching for that is a whole other story.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I probably a good place to end it. What do you think?
I like it.
All right. Well, yeah, team. Anyways, team, if you can hear us, I appreciate you listening to the Happy Girls Gym podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Give us a follow on YouTube, Instagram, wherever you want, Spotify as well. Would love to chat with you a little more. You can also send us an email at happygirlsgympodcast@gmail.com, and you can take your feedback. You can ask us about anything else or whatever you want to hear, and we're always here to help you out here. You can see more video of Murph if you watch our YouTube. All right. Well, team, have a great rest of your day. Hopefully this was recorded, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right. That one guy.